morning, everybody. Shady Side asked me who I wanted to introduce me here today. I have great affection and deep admiration for all of the teachers, including Richard Gable, Angela Irvine, John Landreth, Carol Jean McGreevy-Morales, and Karen Pavlik, who are here with us today, administrators and other staff from my time here. I'm especially honored that Stan Nivola agreed to introduce me. Mr. Nivola is a prince of a man. He was always encouraging, kind, and passionate about his work and his students. He taught me not only to play percussion, but also to appreciate music and the arts more generally. He made music fascinating, fun, and memorable. I learned from him that an effective way to teach is to make the learning process entertaining as well as educational. I found out it's Mr. Nivola's, Stan's, birthday today. So I hope you'll all join me in giving him a big round of applause for not only being a wonderful teacher, but also in celebration of his special day. It's such an honor to be back here at Shady Side. I love Shady Side. This magnificent high school instilled in me a lifelong commitment to learning, and it gave me lifelong mentors and friends, which is why it's so wonderful to be here today. Whenever I visit Pittsburgh, which I do at least once a year, when some of my Shady Side friends and I go to a Steelers game around Thanksgiving, I always come to campus. And this time I'm happy to have been invited to campus instead of looking like some creepy random guy just slowly driving around checking stuff out. It's such a privilege to speak with you today during this Cum Laude Society induction ceremony, and let this be a lesson to everyone that even after you graduate, Shady Side might still assign you homework. Congratulations to our Cum Laude Society inductees, Narol, Courtney, Erica, Tyler, Elizabeth, Gabrielle, Adam, Emily, Angie, Philip, Zachary, Daniel, Sylvie, Brendan, Xiaoyun, Leah, Shay, Krishna, Anne-Marie, Sarah, Olivia, Ted, Tori, and Michelle. And make no mistake, none of you got here by yourselves. Your family, your other mentors, and your friends all helped you. And so please also join me in a big round of applause for all of your teachers, your parents, siblings, grandparents, other relatives, and friends here. Today I'm going to talk about what our elders sometimes get wrong when they give us advice. Among other things, I'm going to talk about mayonnaise and maggots. Well, one maggot in particular. Before I do, let me offer 3 disclaimers. First, I don't presume to know more than our elders, and I'm grateful for all of their guidance. I acknowledge that they've lived in places and through experiences I haven't. And I know they've only ever wanted to protect us. No parent wants to hear that their child thinks they may have been wrong about some stuff. I wouldn't want to provide advice to my kid that maybe turn out to be wrong either. Speaking of, I just got married in January. More on that later. Thanks. And incidentally, my wife Elizabeth is not a Shady Side alum, but I assure you she is still a decent human being. As a second disclaimer, I want to acknowledge that a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be pretty controversial. Fair enough, many important things in life are pretty controversial. Finally, I've only got like 25 minutes, so what I'm going to talk about is just some of and not necessarily the most important stuff that I've learned. If you want any tips on other stuff, like how to hum and whistle at the same time, which is one of the very few skills I possess, let's talk later. Okay, so I'm going to talk to share with you 3 bits of advice we commonly hear from our elders and why I think they're wrong. The first is about relationships, the second is about success, and the third is about risk. First, relationships. And while it's true that our parents and our siblings, who we do not choose, can be sources of support and joy, I found that those with whom we do choose to surround ourselves, our friends, can be just as loving, caring, and impactful. I consider myself lucky to have wonderful friends. many of whom I met here at Shady Side. I want to talk about two of my friends in particular, one from Shady Side and one not. First, my friend from Shady Side, Jim Mitri, who is here with us today. Jim was my Shady Side classmate. I boarded here in Croft, and he lived right down the road in Fox Chapel. The policy at the time was that boarding students had to leave campus on the weekends, a policy which I'm very pleased to have learned will change this fall. As I sometimes had weekend extracurricular activities or just wanted to hang out in Pittsburgh with friends, I often stayed with Jim and his family, including his wonderful mother, Blima, who is also here with us today. As you've heard from Mr. Navola, I've had a bit of a vagabond life since college. I sometimes lived in DC and Jim would put me up. Jim and his family have thus been putting a roof over my head for much of the past 23 years. But that's not all. A few years ago, when I was crashing at Jim's place yet again, we were both single and online dating. We would search online not only for ourselves, but also for each other. In the subject header of an email he sent me, linking to one person's profile, he wrote, "Marry this woman." And because I implicitly trust Jim's judgment, I did. The profile was, of course, Elizabeth. Jim and his family have been sources of encouragement and inspiration in my spouse selection throughout my entire life. They are like a second family to me. Fortunately, modern technological tools, email, and social media make keeping in close touch easier than ever before. You have the tools at hand, so make time in your busy lives to stay connected. The other friend I want to tell you about is my roommate from freshman year in college, Mike Buchwald. While I was here at Shady Side, I focused a lot on math and science. I still remember Mr. David Wiles' jokes in organic chemistry about chirality changing through a backside attack. He'd grab his butt, do a hop, and say, "Ouch." When I got to college, my interests changed, and much of that is thanks to my roommate, Mike. So I'm eating in the dining hall in college one day, freshman year, and I'm about to take a big bite when I see a maggot on my fork. No offense to maggots, but I was pretty grossed out. When I got back to our room, I told Mike what had happened, and he said to me, "Okay, Zach, you've got two options. One, you can complain to me and nothing will change. Two, you can try to do something about it." Like what, Mike? His answer changed my world. You could make a big difference. For example, you could raise public awareness about food quality through talking to the student newspaper and running for student government. Mike's point essentially was that you, as an individual, can affect change. Now, you hear people say that kind of thing all the time, but I never really truly internalized it before. So if you haven't before, I want you to take a moment right now to internalize it. You, as an individual, can affect change. I responded, "Mike, I have no experience with this stuff, and we're at a fancy school where lots of people have been really involved in these kinds of things." But he persuaded me to talk to the student paper anyway. And in what was perhaps my most proudly articulate public statement ever, I said, and the paper quoted me, "There was a maggot chillin' on my fork." As a side note, a few days later, I overheard two students talking. One said to the other, "I'm just going to chill this weekend." To which the other replied, "What, like a maggot on a fork?" Anyway, so Mike, who had always been interested in politics, offered to run my first student government campaign, which we won. And then my subsequent campaigns, which we won as well. I think our team of student government representatives did a lot of good, from successfully advocating for more diversity in faculty hiring and the tenure ranks, to adopting need-blind admission for all students, including those from overseas, even to changing from the hell that is one-ply toilet paper to the heaven, nay ecstasy, of two-ply. Mike also had me come with him to courses on political science, which became my major, and he helped me see the connections between the academic study of and practical involvement in political and legal issues. Mike became someone who profoundly impacted what I would study and do, as much or more than anyone I've ever known. He propelled me on a course of studying and becoming involved in public service. The beginning of that path was pretty rocky, though. The worst grades I've ever gotten were when I started taking classes in this new field. I didn't even realize the alphabet contained some of those letters. But I decided to stick with it. Mike inspired me to focus on the interplay between scholarship and practice. A lot of what I learned from Mike I would subsequently use when working in academia and for our government, including today. When I later became involved in efforts to prevent and help societies recover from genocide, it was in large part because the friendships I forged with Mike taught me about the role even individuals can play in massive and seemingly intractable problems. So what do I take away from all of this? Contrary to what I've been told, friends can be as important as family. My closest friends, including from Shady Side, have become my brothers and sisters. They include Brendan and Lacey Lupitin, as well as Lauren Kushner, all of whom are here with us today. They are hugely influential and supportive in my life, and I hope I am in theirs too. It's thus wonderfully enriching to invest in friendships. And not just for what you can get out of them, but because you care deeply about these people and and want to be there for them too. The seniors here will all scatter in the months ahead. While you'll all be busily making new friends, I found that I most cherish the ones, like Jim and Mike, I met early in life, who I've known for a long time and with whom I faced so many of life's challenges. There's an old saying, make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other is gold. For us here at Shady Side, I would say, make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other is blue and gold. I run into Shady Side alums all the time through work and play. Our alumni community is strong, and we should keep that network strong by staying involved and giving back, by attending homecoming, reunions, and other events, donating and mentoring current students and recent grads. You already have a lot to offer our community now, and that will only become truer as you learn and grow. And I learned that the smallest things, for me, a maggot in a conversation with my friend, can profoundly affect someone else. And so we should be mindful of how we treat each other. We may never even know just how much impact we have on other people. You could be someone's Jim or Mike and change their world. Okay, so the second thing I want to talk to you about here today is the result of work and passion. And it's certainly true that diligence and what some people call a fire in your belly are essential to achievement. But if there's one thing I want you to take away from here today, it is that chance plays an enormous role in success and in life more generally. And I do mean chance, not luck. Luck usually connotes something positive and unearned. Chance just means things could go one way or another for better or worse, or even just with some neutral outcome. Stan's introduction mentioned various things I've been doing since graduating from here. You might think it was all linear and deliberate, as so much in life is in retrospect, or at least seems. But you'd be wrong. I've already told you how a maggot and some guy I just happened to be paired with as roommates freshman year in college profoundly impacted the direction of my undergrad life. Let me tell you now about how chance played a huge role in what I would go on to do after college. The truth is, because of chance, I was unusually primed to become involved in Rwanda, in war crimes prosecutions, social entrepreneurship, and academia. Now you may ask, how is some random guy from West Virginia who went to Shady Side unusually primed to become involved in a post-genocide situation in a foreign country? Funny you should ask, let me tell you. It has to do with my mom, my religion, my hometown, and my timing. My mother was born and grew up in South Africa and told me stories about the region, so I learned about Africa from an early age. I happen to be Jewish, and several of my relatives perished in the Holocaust. So during my childhood, I learned a lot about the genocide against my own people. Growing up as one of few Jews in Morgantown, West Virginia, I was the target of several instances of anti-Semitism. Simply for being Jewish, some of my classmates spat on me and verbally and physically attacked me. On one occasion, a fellow student who held me personally responsible for the death of Jesus Christ picked me up, turned me over, and rammed my head repeatedly into a rock until I bled. I was in the second grade. On very few occasions did anyone, including teachers, intervene. In some instances, it was actually parents and religious leaders who taught these children how to feel and act towards Jews. It was because of these experiences that I learned early in life that innocence can sometimes suffer discrimination. This discrimination can be manifested violently. Many people, even those with the power to help or in positions of authority, will unfortunately remain bystanders or even initiate or exacerbate these problems. I learned in an early age that it is vital to combat myths, misinformation, and misperceptions that lead to persecution. Timing then twice played a crucial role in my involvement in Rwanda, once in 1994 and the other time 7 years later. The genocide in Rwanda raged for about 100 days from April to July of 1994. At the time, I was finishing my sophomore year here at Shady Side, right when I was really starting to become aware of things beyond my immediate community. I kept an eye out for news about Africa because of my mother's past. I remember hearing snippets about the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda as it was happening, and feeling a visceral reaction because of the traumatizing events in my own past and in the past of my religious community. As a Jew who grew up learning about the Holocaust, it was clear to me that a similar atrocity was being perpetrated against another group of people. I would later learn, including through my history classes here at Shady Side, that of course there have been many other genocides, such as in Cambodia and the Balkans. For me, though, the Rwandan genocide stuck out most in my mind because it was perpetrated precisely as I was becoming aware of the world, with all of its promise and perils. And it's haunted me ever since. I've since spent a lot of time speaking with perpetrators and survivors of the genocide, combing through archives from the genocide, and paying my respects at sites around Rwanda where the smashed skulls, torn clothes, and bloodstains of adult and child victims have been preserved. But it's the ghastly images of Hutu extremists hacking Tutsis with machetes that come to mind when I think about what occurred during those 100 days of hell. I was living just next door in Croft when all of that had happened. Fast forward 7 years to 2001, I visited Rwanda for the first time then, a year after I graduated from college and while I was working for our government on foreign criminal justice issues. I was lucky that my boss at the U.S. Department of Justice, Jim Silverwood, believed in me more than I did and had me travel to developing countries to work on projects I felt unqualified to do. In many ways, Rwanda has always reminded me of West Virginia. Rwanda's nickname is the land of 1,000 hills. Both Rwanda and West Virginia are lush, bucolic, landlocked regions filled with rolling, majestic, verdant hills, plentiful, charming farmlands, and genuinely friendly people. I've thus always felt at home in Rwanda. On my very first trip there, a colleague at the U.S. Embassy took me to a meeting of one of the local Rotary clubs. Both my mother and grandfather have been Rotarians, so I'd always heard wonderful things about this organization. It was during that meeting that I learned that Rwanda had never had a public library, and that the Rotary Club was interested in building one. I recall thinking what a wonderful and absolutely critical initiative this library was. It shocked me that in the 21st century, any country in the world would not have even one such fundamental civic institution. In addition, I knew from studying the genocide how the absence of open access to information, which a public library provides, had played a role in enabling the atrocities. I jumped right in. I was grateful for the opportunity to work on a project that focused on Rwanda's future and survivors, since my primary work concentrated on perpetrators in Rwanda's past. I tell this story because it was a series of chances. My mother's birth in Africa, my heritage as a Jew, my childhood in West Virginia, how old I was during the genocide in Rwanda, a trusting boss, and the precise time that I first visited the country, that I was unusually well situated to become involved in Rwanda's genocide trials and first public library. We need to be cognizant of the role chance plays in all of our lives. Life is so much less predictable than I ever thought. Many outcomes are the result of a string of chances. Those who are religious might attribute our paths to divine intervention or karma. Others might credit or blame fate. Whatever it is, we should recognize that there are many factors beyond our control. And so what should we make of the role of these external, uncontrollable forces? In order to maximize the likelihood of success, we must be mindful of the factors that are within our control. Our own hard work, the skills we develop, our passion, our determination to embrace the world. We must be constantly prepared to seize opportunities when they arise. Because of my background, I had been deeply interested in Rwanda. I was willing and able to become involved however I could. And when the series of chances I described put me in a position to do so, I did. We must appreciate that situations can change suddenly, that life is profoundly uncertain. And so we must be flexible and adaptable, which preparation and an open mind make possible. Some of the first great advice I heard on that note was right here at Shady Side. In an assembly memorial hall, Tom Rossi held up a jar of mayonnaise, just like this one, and advised us to follow the directions that are printed on the side. Keep cool, but do not freeze. I've always appreciated that sentiment, that we effectively need to keep calm and carry on. We must also acknowledge that timing, while it may not, as some people say, be everything, is certainly a very big thing. We must remain humble about our privilege and our achievements. It is for no other reason than some weird coincidence of birth that we were born into the privilege and security that we were, and not, for example, as Tutsi children in Rwanda in 1994. We must acknowledge that chance can work against us, too. So we should forgive ourselves when we make mistakes, as well as be kind and generous when others falter. And we must be sympathetic about others' failures and compassionate about their misfortune. Life is full of vicissitudes any of us could confront. Some who are religious would say, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." And now we come to the third bit of advice elders sometimes offer, but which I think is wrong. Our elders implore us not to take unnecessary risks. There's a phrase in Yiddish that my elders have often quoted to me, "Krieg nit wo mir darf nit," which translates to, "Don't climb where it is unnecessary." In other words, don't take unnecessary risks. But what exactly distinguishes necessary from unnecessary risks? I'm not sure it's as clear as our elders sometimes lead us to believe. For me, the risky thing I do that's most concerned my elders is travel. And believe me, I understand why they have felt this way. My mom was born and grew up in South Africa, which through apartheid became a violent, horribly segregated, and deeply racist place. And of course, our elders want to protect us. I'm sure I will share that instinct too, if Elizabeth and I are fortunate enough to have or adopt children of our own. I started traveling to developing countries around 15 years ago. Unlike some of my other elders, my mother has always encouraged me to take risks. And she herself has been a role model in that way. After her family moved from South Africa to Australia, she moved to the United States alone when she was 22 and without knowing a single person here. But so why travel to risky places? For two main reasons, to learn and to do. First, you can learn more quickly and about different things when you visit a place than you can merely studying it. You get a better sense of the local people and can develop meaningful relationships. Those relationships, in turn, can make you more sympathetic to the nuances of their situation. For example, on one of my earliest trips to Rwanda, I met a woman named Chantal. Just a few years earlier, Hutu extremists hacked her with machetes and left her for dead. They threw her in a pit and piled on top her children and husband, who were also attacked and who died. Chantal escaped but was scarred emotionally and physically. Now she lives next door to the person she accuses of killing her family and mutilating her. I came to admire Chantal's ability to discuss openly and with great dignity her agonizing experiences. Knowing Chantal has helped me to better understand the anguish of genocide victims and their ongoing struggles. Her scars have touched me deeply. You might think, as I initially did, that Rwanda's narrative during the genocide was one of incalculable wickedness and horror. But just like in every other genocide, some Rwandans protected and rescued each other, always with great risk to themselves and their loved ones, and sometimes in ingenious ways. What I learned, therefore, is that in the most horrific crises, altruism perseveres and may even increase. The best good shines brightest during the worst evil. Through travel, you learn how the world works and challenges other people face on a daily basis. Once, a little over a decade ago, I was traveling in Africa for work and bought a ticket to fly between two places. So the flight was supposed to take me on an overland route between points A and B. After waking up from a nap, I look out the window and see that we're flying over water. I ask the flight attendant where we're headed, and she responds that the pilot decided to change course and head to point C because more people wanted to go to the new destination. I stated that I had bought a ticket for point B. She told me she'd go speak to the pilot. She returned smiling from ear to ear and said, "Sir, typically it costs more money to go to point C. We're not going to charge you the difference." "That's very generous of you," I responded. "But I bought a ticket to point B and I actually need to get there for work." "Okay," she said, "let me go talk to the pilot again." When she returned, she asked me, "Sir, you're American, aren't you?" Bewildered, I responded, "Yes." She said, "Well, you people like democracy, right?" Puzzled about where this was going, I said, "I suppose so, yes." She then proudly proclaimed, "Okay, so what we're going to do is take a vote. You can get up and give a speech about changing directions. If you win, we'll go to point B. If you lose, we'll continue heading to point C." Sounds perfectly reasonable, I said. So I got up, explained to the other passengers how I had paid for a ticket to go to point B, that the plane was supposed to go there, and that I, in fact, needed to get there. We then held a vote. I was the only person to vote to go to point B. After the plane landed at point C, the pilot kindly brought me back to the mainland and dropped me off in a field. He didn't even turn off the engine. I then had a hitchhike for something like 10 hours, sitting in my suit next to a cute and affectionate but pretty stinky goat. Now I understand that not all of your travel will go as planned. Leave a little extra time. Just relax and stay cool. Heed Mr. Rossi's mayonnaise instructions. Through travel, you might learn that what other people consider risky places aren't that risky after all. Let me tell you a little bit about Rwanda since the genocide in '94. Kigali, the capital, is one of the safest, cleanest cities I've ever visited. In fact, I feel safer walking around Kigali at night than I do DC. The Peace Corps describes Kigali as one of the safest cities anywhere. On the last Saturday of every month, residents in Rwanda, Rwandans and expats alike, participate in umuganda, or community work, to help clean their neighborhoods and build houses, schools, and hospitals. Since '94, maternal and infant mortality in Rwanda have both plummeted, while life expectancy has skyrocketed. A university just across town from here, Carnegie Mellon, chose Kigali as a city in which to build its overseas campus. With 64% of parliamentary seats currently held by women, 64%, Rwanda now ranks first in the entire world for female representation in an elected legislature. By comparison, only 20% of our congressional members are women, placing the United States 72nd in the world. We could learn a lot from Rwanda about, among other things, post-conflict reconstruction and reconciliation, as well as women's representation in government. It's only through visiting a place that you can develop firsthand insights that can lead to truly original contributions. In academia, we call this primary research through fieldwork. Much of what I write and teach about is based on the interviews I conduct, observations I make, and materials I collect through my travels. Second, besides learning, you can only do certain things through travel. You can see things you can't elsewhere. For example, genocide sites are preserved all over Rwanda. Unless you see the actual evidence, it's difficult to comprehend the enormity, the cruelty of what happened. It's one thing to read or hear about it. It's another to see it, to smell it, right in front of your face. I might not have learned that Rwanda never had a public library had I not started spending time there. Nor would my teammates and I have developed the relationships we needed to collect books and to raise both funds and public awareness about the cause. So I disagree when our elders caution us against taking certain risks. What may seem unnecessary to them may be essential to our personal and professional development. What's more, such risks may be crucial to learning about and making meaningful contributions to the communities we visit. By the way, when I encourage you to travel, I don't just mean to foreign countries. While exploring and working in an unfamiliar community can certainly be educational and helpful, if you cannot afford to or do not otherwise have the opportunity, you need not necessarily go overseas to do so. As we all know too well, we here in the United States face persistent problems, including poverty, homelessness, illiteracy, unemployment, and discrimination. Too often we assume that cultural enrichment and valuable public service occur only abroad. But gaining worldliness while making a meaningful contribution to social ills can also start at home. And traveling is just one type of risk we take. There are many other risks we confront in our personal and professional lives. Those graduating will soon confront risks by considering what new things to try, new friendships, new places, new subjects of study, new extracurricular activities, even new ways of thinking. I encourage you to make up your own mind about what risks are worthwhile. Be brave, but not foolish. So congratulations once again to our Cum Laude Society inductees today. Along with all of the other young people here today, I implore you to invest deeply in your friendships, including the ones from here at Shady Side. Work hard and follow your passions, but be mindful and prepared for the role of chance in life. And take bold risks, even ones that seem unnecessary to other people. Overall, listen to other people, including your elders, but don't necessarily do all of what they say. Great advances are dependent on people ignoring what others say can't or shouldn't be done. So listen most of all to yourself. Trust yourself. Trust your brain, but also trust your gut and your heart. Figure out your own life lessons, and all along the way, maintain perspective. Keep cool like mayonnaise, and chill like a maggot on a fork. Thank you.